All right, welcome again to everybody who's joined us here today for our 30 Minutes of Excellence. My name is Kim Meadows, and I am the Training Director for NAWDP. Just to let you know that this webinar is a part of the work that NAWDP is doing in collaboration with Safal Partners as the U.S. Department of Labor's Strategic Partnerships and Systems Alignment Center of Excellence. So with that said, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker for today, Ms. Maria Brady, and I will turn it over to Maria to facilitate our 30 Minutes of Excellence session today. Maria?
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and welcome everyone. We have so much information to cover. I know there are only 9 slides to this presentation, but they're jam-packed with information. Also, if you haven't downloaded a copy of the presentation, please do so. There are detailed slide notes on all of the slides, and that's so that it'll make more sense. A lot of people are visual and it's easy to understand it if you see the verbiage. Okay, before we get started, first things first, there are 5 components to every registered apprenticeship program, right? We have an employer. You can't have a registered apprenticeship program without an employer. We have structured on-the-job learning with mentoring. We have the related instruction that supports the on-the-job learning. We have progressive wage increases, and then we have that national occupational credential. Now, of those 5, the 2 primary components are the on-the-job learning and related instruction. Why we're here today, the eligible training provider list, or the ETP list, pertains only to the related instruction component of a registered apprenticeship program. It has absolutely nothing to do with the on-the-job learning component. So here's what you need to know about the ETPL. And what's in the middle is actually true. They're true statements, although, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. In order to fund an ETP using an ITA, they must be on the ETPL. RAPs are automatically eligible. The RTI portion of a RAP can be funded with an ITA if the sponsor is an ETP on the ETPL. Now, if you understand all of that, then yay, good for you. Okay. But really, those words happen to be in English, but it's when you put them together that, we start to lose people. And I understand that. And that's the purpose of this session. So let's start at the beginning. WIOA represents limited funds intended to have the maximum benefit for those with the greatest need, as it says so on your slide. So we have limited training dollars, and we have to make the most of those training dollars by investing in the most effective and high-performing programs, and we call those eligible training providers, or ETPs. In order to be an eligible training provider, an entity has to submit loads of performance-related information and statistics to the state, and it's typically to the state workforce agency. Now, registered apprenticeship programs, or RAPs, are exempt from all of those requirements. They need only provide very basic information to be included on a statewide eligible training provider list. Now, to complicate things, there are statewide lists, and there could be local ETP lists. So some states have one statewide list, and that's it. This is the case in single area states that have no local boards, as an example, Utah, South Dakota, North Dakota, and many other states that choose that route. In other states, let's say you have 20 local boards, you could have one statewide list and then a list for each of the local boards, which makes a total of 21 lists, which is very unwieldy. Now, if you add to that the requirement that all occupations, because remember, limited funds, so occupations must be in demand. It's not like the bridge to nowhere, right? You're going to train in occupations where there's a job at the other end. So that adds another layer of complication, because at the local level, you have to demonstrate that these occupations are in demand in the local area. Now, the intent is minimum burden for registered apprenticeship program sponsors. So you can see right from the get-go that there's a tension here with respect to burden and then what requirements are being promulgated. Now, the ETP, eligible training providers, and the statewide list, that is one of many areas where WIOA requires states to develop policy, but not all state policies are created equal. All of the state policies pertaining to eligible training providers are going to be based on Training and Employment Guidance Letter 8-19. And you can access it on the web based on the address on your slide. Requirements are going to be on Attachment 4. So TEGL 819 pertains to the entire workforce system under Title I, but Attachment 4 pertains specifically to registered apprenticeship programs. And what it has in Attachment 4, it lists 5 pieces of information, and that's it. Local boards can add additional requirements for eligible training providers generally, like, for instance, requiring higher performance outcomes, but they cannot do that for registered apprenticeship programs. That's a big no-no. There are no additional requirements for registered apprenticeship programs. They're not subject to what we call initial eligibility, continued eligibility. They are automatically eligible. So here's a couple of myths and questions. Is it true that WIOA can fund any national registered apprenticeship program, even if they're not on our statewide eligible training provider list? No, that is not true. You can only use WIOA funds to support related instruction when the sponsor on the eligible training provider list. It doesn't matter if it's a national program or a local program. In order to fund the related instruction using WIOA dollars, you have to get an ITA. In order to get the ITA, you have to be working with an eligible training provider who's on the eligible training provider list. I know it's like who's on first, but that's the reality. Number 2, if registered apprenticeship programs aren't on our statewide list, we can't support those programs or those apprentices. That's incorrect, and it's kind of a trick statement, if you will, because remember what we said when we started. The eligible training provider list pertains to only one of the primary components of a registered apprenticeship program. It pertains to the related instruction, or what some people call related training and instruction, or RTI. WIOA dollars can still support the on-the-job learning component. So it is an incorrect statement to say, okay, the registered apprenticeship program isn't on our statewide ETP list, we can't support it. Well, that's not true, because you can still support the on-the-job learning through a wage reimbursement. Number 3, if a registered apprenticeship program is not on our local ETP list, but they're on our state ETP list, we cannot support it with WIOA dollars. That is incorrect, and it shows a misunderstanding, because every local list, if it exists, must be a subset of the state list. So there can't be something on the local list that's not on the statewide list. Number 4, it is possible to use a contract instead of individual individual training accounts or ITAs, when you're funding a cohort, like a class of apprentices with their related instruction. This is actually true, and it's a beautiful thing. The concept of cohort funding was first introduced way back in 2016 in Training and Employment Guidance Letter 13-16, which definitely should be part of your playbook. It basically is registered apprenticeship provisions in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Okay, so we have local lists and we have a statewide list. In a state where there are local lists, you can't have a provider on the local list if it's not on the statewide list. Just look at the concentric circles there. So the local list is absorbed by the statewide list in a state that has local lists. Local boards can't add additional requirements for registered apprenticeship programs. We said that, we're saying it again. I've seen state plans and state plan modifications. We still see some additional burden being placed on our sponsors, which is not appropriate. Now, here's a couple of examples. In one state, in one local area, and I've seen something like this in a lot of places, a local council has to approve all eligible training providers. Okay, that's fine, but you can't do that for registered apprenticeship programs. There is no gate that they have to pass. They are automatically eligible. No performance requirements, no reporting requirements. They don't go before a council. The next example, the local board only funds individuals in registered apprenticeship programs with at least 5 apprentices. Now, I've actually seen this, and for some reason, 5 is the magic number. I've seen this in a lot of states and in a lot of local areas where they have local ETP policies. Where they say we'll only give an ITA if there are at least 5 apprentices on board. You can't do that. That is prohibited. Although one of the items that we request of sponsors is to give us the number of active apprentices, that doesn't mean that they have to have any. In fact, apprenticeship regulations, 29 CFR Part 29, basically gives our sponsors 1 year to register their first apprentice. Of course, we want to register programs and have them bring on apprentices right away, but they have up to a year. Okay, now the last one, a local board can't fund a registered apprenticeship program unless the occupation is on the local in-demand list. Now that gives me heartburn. And it depends, and I believe, actually, let me go back. We have a recommendation. It's not a requirement. It's a strong recommendation in TEGL 8-19, change 1, where we specifically say states, please add a provision that says if a registered apprenticeship program is taking applications, automatically consider them to be in-demand occupations because there is a job at the other end. There is that clear expectation. You can't get more in demand than that. Now, I'm happy to say that more and more states, since we initially recommended this way back in 2016, 2017, many states have this policy provision in their statewide policy, but many do not. And even in cases where states do have this policy provision, I've talked to some local staff and they're not aware that it exists. So they're still jumping through all those local hoops to prove in-demand status, even for registered apprenticeship programs. And remember, you know, WIOA represents limited dollars. So you have to jump through these hoops and demonstrate that it's an in-demand occupation you're funding the training for. But that doesn't apply to registered apprenticeship programs because registered apprenticeship is a job. Okay. Wow, doing great with time. What can you do? Well, first off, you need to get a copy of your state's eligible training provider policy. Okay. Does the state policy say that a sponsor taking application should automatically be considered in demand? We said that in TEGL 819 change 1. And by the way, I mentioned that TEGL 8-19 is a policy that pertains to all Title I training providers. TEGL 819 change 1 pertains only to registered apprenticeship programs. What this change 1 guidance does, and it was in 2019, the other one was 2016. There were 5 issues that we were seeing in WIOA implementation regarding the eligible training provider list. And one of those issues was that our sponsors were not being funded because their occupation was not considered to be in demand. So change 1 guidance actually strongly recommends that states have this provision. If you're at the local level, find out if there's a local eligible training provider list policy. If there is one, get a hold of it. Review this presentation. I would really recommend, because I know I went quickly, there's a lot. This is a very complicated topic. That's one of the reasons why I did a presentation with a lot of slide notes that are in English, okay? So print it out and with the slide notes, read it and see if you have questions, and you could always reach out. You got to keep asking questions. This is a critical topic area. NAWDP, my friends at NAWDP, and the Technical Assistance Center of Excellence, they're going to be doing more in the area of ETPs and the ETPL. And as you probably know, their annual conference is coming up. It's going to be in New Orleans in May of this year. I can't believe I'm saying this year, 2023. And they will be talking more about the eligible training provider list. So keep asking questions. With that, I would like to take any and all comers. If you'd like to go off mute, actually, let me see if I can. I don't use Zoom. I don't know how to look at the notes. Okay, I see a hand.
Good morning, Maria. First of all, I just want to say thank you for providing this training. It's very helpful, it's useful, and I appreciate it. So one of the questions is the PowerPoint. Will you be able to provide that with us, or will we get a copy of the recording? And I jumped on like a few minutes late, so I'm not sure if that was already addressed.
Sure. No, it's not a problem. It
Okay.
was actually sent out previously because I like folks to have my presentations before I even present so that they could be prepared if they want to be. But if you don't have it, we could definitely send it, and just make sure that you take a look at the slide notes. Everything you heard me say, including more examples, are in the slide notes. Okay.
Great. And then you also mentioned a conference that's coming up.
Yes.
Would you be, what is the name of that conference, or would you be able to share, or somebody, if you have that information, drop it in the chat box and then we'll go ahead and look it up? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Not just do NAWDP annual conference, NAWDP.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And you'll see that it's in New Orleans in May, and it's an awesome event.
Okay, great.
Okay,
and I see that
folks,
Rosan put in the notes and the view. So thank you, Rosan, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
And I'm just seeing flashes that say, because I can't read all the chat, that people didn't get the slides. I'm so sorry. We'll make sure that you get them. I'm talking about the slides and the notes, and people don't have them. I'm sorry.
Miss Grant, Rosan Grant ended up putting the link on there. So it's in the chat box. So she provided it and shared it with all of us. So thank you.
What, the slides?
I see the notes for one of the PowerPoints. Let me see. I haven't opened it up. Yeah, okay. The notes with the slides are in there.
Okay, good. Awesome.
So they just dropped it in there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Yes, hi, my name is Maria with Salve Workforce Investment Board, and I do have a question. So we understand that, we shouldn't be asking for additional information, but there are some forms that we do need for the provider to fill out. Obviously it's not the initial eligibility or continued, but there's forms, for example, for
EIN?
apprenticeships to register to get, in order for them to receive payment, or, sometimes there's form where they're asked about the programs, because we need information more in detail as far as price, hours, weeks, and all that stuff.
No, you cannot ask for cost. The only time you can, and this is regulatory, the only time you can ask for the cost of related instruction is if the provider of related instruction is different from the sponsor. That is the only time you are allowed to ask for cost. Otherwise, it's just 5 pieces of information. The
So
name and
how
address.
much, I guess, how does American Job Center of California knows what to pay? Is it free then?
Oh,
Would it
no,
be
it's
a no
not.
cost?
It's not. You can make a phone call. The individual can find that out. A lot of, and I'm sorry if, I hope it doesn't sound flippant. Some of the sponsors, many of the sponsors are employers, okay? They don't cost out their related instruction that they may be providing in-house. You see what I'm saying? Like, you've gone to in-service training, right? What's the cost? We're not going to put our employers through that.
Yeah, and that's on the job, but what about the classroom,
No, I'm saying if the employer is also the provider of related instruction. I'm giving an example.
Oh, got it.
And you could always reach out to me if you have additional questions.
Yeah, because we can't pay unless, because there has to be an ITA, like a form filled out where, it's been agreed upon that, this is how much the training is, this is how long it's going to take. And,
Okay.
for us to set up to get to pay the.
You're allowed to ask for the employer identification number, the EIN. Obviously, cooler heads have to prevail. So the 5 pieces of information, if you ask for number 6, and that happens to be the EIN, that's okay. But in terms of asking for the cost, asking for, what's their completion rate, or how many apprentices did they have in the last training cycle, or anything like that, is not okay.
Yeah, and that we understand.
Okay.
It's just the payment. So without us being able to obligate some training dollars, because that is a WIOA requirement, we have to be able to, say how much we're paying for a program. There has to be an agreement before the training starts.
I
as far as the
understand.
costs
I
and all that.
understand what you're saying, but that's
so
not
Maria-
something that's listed.
So Maria Brady, to the
Yes.
point, Lori Strumpf.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, how are you? I think what you're saying, but help me clarify for the other Maria, if the employer is doing the apprenticeship on site as an OJT, and they are also
And the related instruction,
the
yes.
related instruction, you're paying for it through the OJT. You don't need to separate out the cost. It's just
No, you're paying for it's not costed out because it's in-service training.
right. But so the support that you're providing is the OJT. Is that, you're paying for the OJT. Isn't that correct?
You can do that, correct.
And then if they are doing some kind of in-house training as part of the OJT, that's all just part of the cost of the OJT. It would only be if the employer is contracted, for example, with a community college to do additional training offsite as a combination to the apprenticeship. Then Maria's question could be answered about what that would cost.
If you have an employer who is using a community college, the employer is the sponsor, they're using a community college, the related instruction provider is different from the sponsor. That's an instance where you can ask for cost.
But if the employer is doing it themselves on site, it's just part of your
You're not
OJT contract with them.
I don't like when you say it's part of the OJT.
Okay,
Okay?
well, but
Because
I'm trying to,
OJT and related instruction are two separate pieces.
Are
But-
they
but-
reimbursed for the related instruction if they're doing it in-house?
It depends. I mean,
but that's what
it's gonna
Maria's trying
depend
to,
on a whole bunch of different things.
but that's what Maria's trying to get to, Maria, which is if the employer is doing the apprenticeship whole cloth in full, they're not, there's no other entity, the sponsor is doing it, and you have an OJT contract with them as the sponsor as part of the apprenticeship, then it doesn't matter that they're delivering some kind of training in-house as well. I'm trying to find a way to say it that matches what you're trying to say and helps people understand.
Typically, if the employer, it's like a union, they're already paying for the related instruction. So you could support it by paying a wage reimbursement, the on-the-job learning. If the employer is paying for an outside trainer, they are eligible for funding. That's one of the things that I mentioned. We have more time. And
Thanks,
Lori,
Maria.
I remember, we go way back,
You
actually.
do go way back
My
because,
last name was Remboulis, right,
yes,
New York.
because I'm old, you're still young, but yes,
I'm in my mid-60s.
we go way back.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a
Maria.
question. Once again, this is Rosalinda Rivas over here at Moreno Valley College. What about registered pre-apprenticeship programs?
We don't
Do you-
register pre-apprenticeship programs at the federal level. However,
Okay.
we have quality pre-apprenticeship programs that are defined in Training and Employment Notice 13-12.
13-12. Okay, great. Okay, great.
So
Thank
you could actually Google TEN 13-12, and that's going to describe a quality pre-apprenticeship program. WIOA will only support quality pre-apprenticeship programs.
Perfect. And then you said TEN 13-12?
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this is Deborah Shepherd. I have a question. I'm also with the South Bay Workforce Investment Board. Maria, you keep using the term sponsor.
Yes.
If the employer is not the actual standards sponsor, let's say the workforce board is, or some
Okay.
other person is, do your comments still apply in terms
So-
of what
okay.
you've been saying?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. Let me use a real life example, okay? So let's say the very first workforce board in the country to become a sponsor was West Michigan Works, okay? They did an MA, medical assistant. So they actually supported the medical assistant related instruction. I'm going way back and using my memory here with WIOA dollars, okay, the MA related instruction. And they also actually supported, I mean, they were dealing with, this was many years ago, dealing with horrible shortages like so many of us. And they also paid, and I think they used state money to pay additional percentage of wages. So they did both plus supportive services. And then they ended up getting numerous grants. They're actually a case study on our website, Deborah. Did that help? Deborah, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
I think so. So if we take it to today's world, and we're the sponsor for the employer, because the employer is just not ready to be a sponsor, they still can apply for WIOA funds on the same rules that you mentioned, where they don't have to show performance, they don't have to show
Okay, and because I'm visual, I have to see the words. I'm sorry, and I'm not following. So the local board is the sponsor, and you have an employer who's providing the on-the-job learning And then
Correct.
there's the related instruction provider, and it's also not you.
No, let's say it's the employer. Let's say the employer is providing, to make it easy, let's say the employer is providing the instruction for the RTI, but they are not the sponsor of the apprenticeship. That's my question. If the board or some other entity
So
is the
let's say an
sponsor.
employer association, okay? Let's say an employer association, or let's say NAWDP. Let's say NAWDP was the sponsor and the entity providing the on-the-job learning is a local board, and the local board is providing the related instruction. That's actually happening right now in many places in Texas. And I'm sure in other places too. So yeah, you could use WIOA dollars.
Okay.
And if you're interested, what is it? Central Texas Workforce Development Board. And the occupation is workforce development professional.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think we have time. I mean, I kind of went through, I wanted you guys to have the presentation so many of you could read it in advance and then we could talk turkey. So I hope that I've been responsive to your questions. I think there's time. It's 1 minute, it's a minute after, but can we take another one, Kimberly?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
And just
anyone
let me
else?
also just
Okay.
say, Maria, really quickly, that the email with the PowerPoint slide went out on Monday and it comes from Melissa Robbins, but we will send it out again to everybody who registered. So you will get that after this webinar is over.
Thank you,
Thank you, Kim.
Kimberly. Can I get the replay like right now? I'm kidding.
The replay will be available on our NAWDP YouTube channel. So that will be available tomorrow. And you can just go to YouTube and type in NAWDP and it will be there.
It's been my pleasure to present to you this afternoon. This is a difficult topic. Remember, keep asking questions. If I said anything that doesn't sound kosher, reach out to me. I used to be perfect, but it was too stressful. So anyway, just reach out.
Absolutely. Again, thank you all so much for joining us here today. If you have any follow-up questions that you think about later, definitely email me at kim@nawdp.org, or you can, and I can get that to Maria, or you can email Maria directly. But if you have any questions that you think of later on, we will definitely get those questions answered for you. But we thank you all for joining us here today. Again, you'll get the PowerPoint slide. If you didn't receive it, you'll get that later this afternoon, and it will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So thank you all again. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.